So it was a really significant weekend in the Premier League title race. Arsenal are 6 points clear after beating Leeds at Ellen Road. Man City failed to respond at the weekend, throwing away a 2-goal lead at Tottenham to draw 2-2. So James, you were at both games. You were at Leeds before you went to Tottenham on Saturday. And I mean, you picked two great games. It was a great weekend to kind of suggest that the title race wasn't decided this weekend, but it's certainly a significant weekend.
Yeah, it was. And I think everybody, I sort of, it was a late decision really to go to Ellen Road. And that was partly because obviously of what had happened before against United, and just the kind of mood around Arsenal had darkened quite considerably off the back of that result. And suddenly 4 points, the 4 looked a very small number. And I think everybody thought, obviously Leeds have been very good at home this season and in quite good form recently, that it sort of felt like it could be another chance for Arsenal to slip up, and City would be then, right back in the mix for winning the league. So, and I have to say, it was probably their most complete performance of the season, or certainly up there with it. Right from the minute one, they suffocated the life out of Leeds. And actually, it sort of made me thinking afterwards, and maybe I think was guilty of this, and I think a lot of people were, after the United game, thinking, well, something's got to change. Arsenal have to slightly adapt the way they play. They've got to be a bit less risk averse. They've got to, just introduce a little bit more dynamism into their play. What they actually did was double down on the sort of Arteta control, sort of style, and make that the most efficient, ruthless version of themselves. Because it was just the epitome, the archetypal Arteta Arsenal performance. Control the game, dominate possession, gain an advantage through your set-piece prowess, and then bring your finishes on in the second half to kill the game really on the counter-attack. And obviously the scoreline was very impressive, 4-0 in the end. And that didn't really, often when teams win 4-0, you think, oh, they've played brilliant football and rolled them over. Wasn't the case. They just had strangled the life out of Leeds for an hour. And then brought on their, with the power they've got, and we all talk about their squad depth to go and finish it off. So I think the biggest contrast, having then watched City a day later, was the fact that at 2-0, Leeds had their best spell of the game early in the second half, but they didn't create anything. They had one, I think, quite tame header from a corner that was an easy save for David Raya. And Leeds were never able to sort of gain some momentum and get up ahead of steam and obviously score a goal that would have brought the crowd into it in a way that City then weren't able to replicate a day later. They raced into that 2-goal lead at Spurs, but relinquished control in the second half. And I thought it was a real noticeable contrast between the teams, and will be a real source of validation, I think, for Arteta, that his team was able to win that way with that level of control. Leeds had 3 shots in the whole game and never looked like scoring.
I mean, Leeds are a strange team, aren't they? I mean, obviously the goalkeeping situation at Leeds helped because Carl Darlow didn't have the best of games, shall we say. But I mean, Leeds have beaten Chelsea at Ellen Road. They drew with Liverpool, drew Man United. So it is kind of a formidable place to go to. But you're right, Arsenal made it look really easy. And I think that's the kind of, like you said about Arteta sticking to his tried and tested method. That was the way to do it at Leeds, because Leeds are a team that can play against a team that plays football. But the strength of Arsenal, I think that is the key. And in many ways, it's almost like the media fraternity, ourselves, ex-players, it's almost like bullying Arsenal into playing a bit more expansive football. But Arteta's like, this way works for me. Let's stick to this because it does work.
Yeah, and also that, I think that was quite symptomatic with the lineup, because he dropped Martin Odegaard, the captain, and for months there's been a debate about whether it's Odegaard or Eze. Do you want the control that Odegaard can bring you, or do you want the sort of dynamism, unpredictability that Eberechi Eze can give you? And in the end, he went with Kai Havertz. And why did he do that? He did that because he wanted more physicality. He wanted to be able to press the ball better. He always talks about how good Havertz is off the ball. And he wanted to really dominate physically and have that absolute power in midfield to strangle the life out of Leeds. And again, it's Arteta's going to do, as the piece I did from the game was, win or lose, they're going to do it Arteta's way. This is how they're going to do it. They're not going to become this more, when he talked about, after the United game, he talked about, jump on the boat, it's going to be fun and, enjoy the moment. That none of that was about changing the style of football or opening up or being less risk averse, as we've talked about on the pod last week. That was all about, let's be the very best version of ourselves, because this is what's going to win the title. And they overcame adversity in the build-up. Of course, Saka got injured in the warm-up. They chose not to risk him. Noni Madueke comes in. There's a bit of fortune in that obviously Madueke wasn't going to play, but he comes in, he starts, and he's their most creative player. He's their biggest threat. His set-piece delivery was incredible. Of course, he basically scored direct from a corner. I think that goal's now been given to him, actually, rather than a Darlow own goal. And obviously Madueke wouldn't have been anywhere near the team had Saka been fit. So there's a bit of luck involved. But yeah, I mean, the physicality and the power that Arsenal have gives them such an advantage. It's just they've not been able of late to then align that with a goal threat. But they did both on Saturday.
Rob, I'll just bring you in a minute because I know you were at the game yesterday with James. But just before I just jump to that game, having seen both teams back to back, James, have you been surprised by how unimpressive City were? I mean, I've seen City a bit recently, and what really strikes me is that their midfield is pretty average, to be honest. It used to be the powerhouse of their team, but it's not the same anymore. And they obviously got Semenyo's doing well for them, and Haaland's not scoring goals. But City, for me, they're not a team that looks like they can sustain a title challenge. And right now, it looks like a battle for second place between City, Villa, maybe Liverpool and Man United, because City aren't capable of pushing Arsenal all the way. And having seen them both back-to-back in the space of 24 hours, did you see anything in City that told you that they can actually get back in the title race and stop Arsenal winning? It's a 6-point gap now.
Yeah, it was interesting to see them one day after the other like that. And obviously Rob sees them more than I do, but you never got the sense with City. And actually I said this to Rob during the first half, that when they were only 1-0 up, is that why are they not going for the throat here? Why are they not killing this game off? Why are they not, Spurs were so bad. It was so sterile, the atmosphere in the first half. It was a mixture of sort of apathy towards the general situation at Tottenham and their own team's performance, and the fact that there was quite a considerable number in that crowd who were quite happy for their team to lose, because it meant that they cut the gap. City would cut the gap to Arsenal. Of course, they absolutely do not want to win the league. And City didn't go for the throat. They didn't kill that game off, and they didn't play with the same authority that Arsenal have done. And what we've seen in the last few weeks is Arsenal's authority in those matches just slip a little bit. They're defensively, they've not been as resilient. They've allowed teams to play against them. You look at, and I thought Man United were very good at this. They were very brave. They kept going even at 2-2. They kept on the front foot trying to play and go forward. And Arsenal they just lost that ability to stifle teams and to control the games as well as they had been earlier in the part of the season. I remember when they went to Fulham earlier in the season, they went 1-0 up and Fulham didn't have a shot of any description for the final half an hour. Nothing at all. Like, that's how good they were defensively. Whereas you always feel with this City team, you've got a chance. They let you play a bit. And that was not the case with the sort of vintage Guardiola sides, was it? It was always a case that they would score, they'd get ahead, and they'd just keep the ball for an hour and you'd never even see it. Whereas they don't seem to have that, as you mentioned, in midfield. They don't have that level of control, and teams, while they're 1 or 2-0 down, they feel they've got a chance to get back into the game. And that's obviously what we saw with Spurs.
Rob, do you think with City it's a case of there's such a sense of uncertainty around the club? Obviously, the 115 charges seems to be there forever, this big grey cloud that never seems to be resolved. But the Guardiola situation, there's so much noise around his future. Do you think that's kind of infecting the team and the squad in a sense of uncertainty, and that whether the players feel he's lost a bit of authority or something, because they don't seem to have that togetherness that they had for 8-9 years in the Pep? There's something that's definitely missing. Is it that, or is it just a case of that they've not bought as well as they've sold?
No, I think James has kind of hit the nail on the head there, that in the past, Guardiola teams have had that control, and when they've gone 2-0 up in games, that would have been game over. And it's something that started happening last season. There was a game a Champions League game against Feyenoord where they were 3-0 up at home, and then people were walking out the stadium thinking that's probably it, and it ended up finishing 3-3, and we'd never ever seen that with a Guardiola team. At the time, it was kind of brushed off as, they've got a lot of injuries, it's not been a great season, it's just one of those things. But it's something that they've not really solved. I think part of the problem is obviously Rodri. In the past, Rodri is the guy that gives you that control, because under any kind of pressure, in any kind of situation, you give him the ball, he bounces it back, and then you're out of the press and you're on your way, kind of thing. Is that good of a player. Just to me, at the moment, he just doesn't look the same. I don't think that he particularly trusts his body, or he's at least still learning what his body can do and can't do after that knee injury. And it wasn't just on Sunday against Spurs. You've seen it in games all the way through the season when he's tried to come back. He just doesn't look the same player. He looks a little bit more fraught in the way that he plays, and I think that kind of infects the rest of the team. I mean, what happened at Spurs has been coming for a couple of weeks, really. That they kept clean sheets last week against Wolves and also Galatasaray, but after half time they looked quite vulnerable in games where there was no need to look vulnerable. Both those games were essentially already won, but just after half time, Wolves and Galatasaray both got into it. Donnarumma's had to make a couple of saves. In the end, he's been good enough to keep City from conceding a goal, and City have then gone on to win the game. But that just didn't happen at Spurs, probably because they've got better players. And it was interesting after the game, and obviously me and James were both in the post-match news conference with Guardiola, and he says that momentum in the Premier League is very, very difficult to change when it switches in Premier League games, and I think that's probably true. But in the past, City have been able to resist whatever that is, and at the moment they just can't do it. And there is a sense of vulnerability. I think teams sense blood a little bit, and the worry for City was that at half-time against Spurs, to me, it just came out of nowhere. There was nothing at half-time to suggest that was going to change. And actually, during half-time, we were talking to our editors about what we were going to do for the game. I had already started writing most of my stuff about City. It was a game ticked off, matched the pace with Arsenal. Well done. Arsenal had gone and beaten Leeds, but City had done their job. And, just in the second half, it switched almost in a couple of minutes. And actually, I thought they were lucky to get out of there with a draw in the end, because Donnarumma made a couple of fantastic saves at 2-2. So there is a worry there for City. I still think that they're in the title race. I still think they're capable of putting a run together. I think Guehi and Semenyo are going to be a massive difference to them after they've played a few more games. But right now, obviously, Arsenal are on the box seat.
You say that, Rob, about getting back into the title race, but their run in recent games, in the last 6 Premier League games, they've won once, and that was against Wolves. So, and the next game is Liverpool away, and they've had a terrible record at Anfield over the years, and Liverpool obviously have their own things to chase. So, I mean, you've just said that they can get back into the title race, so I'll probably put this question to James, but are they title contenders, or should they be looking over the shoulder in the race for top 4? Because Liverpool, Man United, even Chelsea have got a bit of form now. Villa is still there or thereabouts. So what is City's priority right now, to safeguard where they are or to push on for the title?
No, I mean, they're still going for the title. I mean, look, I mean, Guardiola was asked after the game about whether there comes a point where he's going to have to prioritise competitions given all the injuries they've had, and maybe not focus on the Premier League. And he sort of immediately dismissed that idea as being a bit foolhardy. So and you can see why. I mean, I think we all went for City to win the league, didn't we, on last week's pod? So 7 days on, we're now going, I don't know, but the issue really is that there isn't a standout runaway team in this league. And what has stopped me from saying Arsenal are going to win it, the only thing really that has stopped me from saying Arsenal are going to win it, is the fact that they've not done it before. They've not done it for 22 years. And I don't subscribe to the view that they've bottled it in the last 3 years. I think, there was one season where they won almost all their games, lost just to Villa and City with the better team. I mean, that can happen, right? What I'm not convinced by is that City are going to be able to put the run together that we all expect them to do. And that's why I think we stumble over this, because Arsenal are the best team in the league with the strongest squad. They're 6 points clear. They should win the league from here. But they haven't done it under Mikel Arteta, and they haven't done it for 2 decades. Pep Guardiola's team is flawed, inconsistent, is more vulnerable than it's looked in years perhaps, and yet they've won 6 of the last 7-8 Premier Leagues. So we expect them to come good, and it's that kind of projection into the future of we're expecting Arsenal to tail off and City to come good that we're just taking on trust. And as the weeks go by, the more I'm just starting to think, well, actually, Arsenal won't have to go to another level to win the league. They'll just grind it out the way they are now. But there's still this thing at the back of my mind that's telling me that Arsenal somehow find a way not to win it and City will come good. So I don't even know where to end that answer. Was that confusing enough for you? Did I sit on the fence enough for you both there?
Point of order there, by the way. I'm pretty sure last week I said Arsenal win the league. I've stuck with them right from the outside.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I think only because I don't think City are good enough to show any consistency. They're not the City of old, and and I keep saying this, and keep getting pulled up for it. But I think if Arsenal win it this year, they'll be the weakest champions for the last 10 years. But that's not their fault; it's because of the fault of the teams that are chasing them. I mean, even Villa slipped up against 10-man Brentford at the weekend. So Arsenal can only do what they can do.
And this is part of the issue that Arsenal have, is that, they talked a lot in the summer about wanting to kick on and become a slightly different team, a bit more of a dynamic team, whereas actually what's probably going to happen here is last season's team is good enough to win this league, because City have dropped off, Liverpool have dropped off, and Arsenal actually, if they stay at the level of more or less where they were last season, playing the kind of football they, posting the kind of numbers that they did last season, that'll actually be enough to win the title. And there's no criticism of Arsenal. You can literally only beat what's put in front of you. But I think that, when we've seen them wobble of late, it's because they're thinking, well, actually, do we need to break the cycle of our old habits? And I think that's why Saturday was so instructive, was that they decided, no, this is how we're going to win the league. This is how we believe we're going to do it. It may not be pretty, and it may not yield win after win after win. We may draw the odd game because we don't take, the ultimate risks, but actually it will be enough.
Rob, I mean, I'm still picking City. There are 14 games left. I still think that City are right in it. The one thing I would say is all the way through this podcast we've said about Arsenal is that we're not going to know about their mentality until they prove it. And for me, this weekend was the first time where they proved it. Forget the way, the tactical setup and all that kind of stuff. But given the noise after the United defeat, the tough place to go, which Ellen Road is, we all know that if Leeds get on top of you there, the fans get on top of you, it's a really tough place to play. They lost Saka in the warm-up. To deal with all of that stuff, and then also to go and win 4-0 is really, really impressive. So you've got to give credit to Arsenal. For the first time, I think, this season, they've answered a question about their mentality, and obviously that will set them in good stead, because like you said, James, when you've gone so close so many times and not got over the line, the question will be, are you capable of doing it? And so for the first time, I think this weekend that they probably proved it. And I imagine that Guardiola will have looked at that and thought, that the one thing that maybe we could rely on, Arsenal imploding, is maybe not going to happen. And that's where the lack of City's consistency come in. Are City still the same team who can win 14 Premier League games in a row? Probably not. And maybe, it has been a very, very unpredictable season so far, but maybe they are going to need to win 12, 13 games in a row to pip Arsenal.